Chapter 51 Tug of War. Returning to the town of Fulu after, with the greatly vassal King Song Chongjing conducted a round of dragonfly skimming water discussion, Xingyang Shan Lao Yuan still has not stayed in Li's residence for long, ran like flying out of town. In the straw shoes youth entered the mountain place, slightly stopped after, the old man still retreated to his previous punching place, carefully observed the youth in the mud on the deep and shallow footprints. In addition to this, old Yuan's vision between, there are also successively mature faint footprints. Old Yuan guessed that more than half is Feng Lei Yuan that young sword cultivator left behind, himself to the Naping Alley youth punched is when, that person obviously wanted to take advantage of the house fire to go rob, appeared too instantaneously sword chi outside, although slightly awkwardly passed by, concealed deeply, but old Yuan originally experienced hundreds of battles, and in sword Qi rampantly breaking the vase Xingyang Mountain, estimated to cultivate for 1,000 years, towards sword Qi sword intent, really too familiar. This head Xingyang Mountain protected Shan Yuan lived for a long time, so too broad knowledge too well versed in nurturing superior flying sword immortal, among which there are several dozen will bring graceful pocket flying swords, all small as fine ox hair. Also knowledge too big like mountain wind natal flying sword, one sword strike down, river water cut off. Old Yuan paused to consider for a while, then continued to walk forward. After entering the mountain, first there was wild grass spreading, then there was a piece of bamboo forest. On the ground were many dry leaves accumulated from last year's autumn and winter. However, because it was closest to the small town, the bamboo forest did not appear wild and chaotic. Following the path, it was not easy to find footprints. Old Yuan discovered that he was about to leave the bamboo forest. Old Yuan still has not directly walked out of the bamboo forest, but is looking around the four directions, still has not seen on the ground have the young man's footprints. The line of sight moves up, the four directions of the green bamboo also has no clear traces, but old Yuan still has not immediately chased toward the mountain, but is suddenly from the ground grows up, 1 foot steps on a thick and sturdy green bamboo head, slightly increases the force, the body leans toward the other side of the mountain, the bamboo follows the curve, is about to break off the strength, the old man suddenly disperses the air, the sturdy body is like a light floating feather, without the pressure of the heavy burden the green bamboo immediately bounces back, restores straight, the old man like a fairy riding the wind stands at the top of the green bamboo, the body follows the bamboo tree slightly sways, looks around the four directions after, lowers the head to observe the four directions. Finally discovered by old Yuan the traces left behind, pulls the corner of the mouth, toward the left hand all the way looks into the distance, carefully listens after, vaguely hears the sound of the stream flowing water. Old Yuan coldly laughed and said, as expected, cunning as always. Old Yuan stepped on each bamboo tree, toward the left side of the small stream running away, along the way did not know how many bamboo trees he stepped on and cut off, after entering Shiban, for the straw shoes youth was along the stream toward the deep mountain old forest go down to escape. Old Yuan in a moment was a little hesitant. Old Yuan squatted Shiban, frowned, a little resentful, if it was outside the world, as long as there was a slight spiritual energy of the high mountain, old Yuan only needed to casually grab, was able to bring that lost support local god powerful decree out, just asked and knew the direction the youth went. This can also be considered as Pan Shan Yuan's innate divine ability, otherwise other cultivators, despite your heavenly magic and illustrious reputation, would absolutely not be able to easily wave your hands and feet at a person with a great atmosphere and great power. This is just like a secular dynasty official's office. Even the Minister of War would find it very difficult to scold a small Ministry of Revenue official's assistant, important staff members' assistants do this and that. The most important thing is that this Minister of War and the assistants are not in a country's temple. Old Yuan listened to the clear water, fell into deep thought. According to common sense, that youth 8 parts is from young up the mountain into the water to hone his skills and physique, perhaps also studied too crude breathing and inhalation technique, only then has a completely different body from ordinary people, light body and strong bones, strong blood and energy, so can with old Yuan in the alley roof play cat and mouse game, say so, go familiar with the path of the jungle deep in the escape. Reasonable, if is purely youth mentality, before is. Just rely on a strong blood want revenge, taste too heavy light fierce after, gradually cool down, naturally but so start to think and fear, immediately ran to the south blacksmith shop, looking for Nguyen master shelter, also reasonable inside. The former is just a waste of time, the latter is eager to waste effort not to mention, will even consume Xinjiang mountain incense smoke sentiment. Old Yuan was in accord with his heart, and blurted out, "This young man must die." After saying that, old Yuan had no doubts, and chose to pursue the direction of the stream downstream. The small town to the south, had a small red dirt road, winding and twisting, on both sides were small town commoners' rice fields, the small road halfway, had a dilapidated white wall and black tile small temple, said to be a temple, but in fact it was a palace for commoners to rest and sit, especially in the harvest season, hot summer time or heavy rain weather, whether or not there was a shelter from the rain, was a world apart. At this time Chen Ping'an and Ning Yao are here to discuss and rest. Ning Yao is naturally born with a bright sword heart, at night looking at things, as easy as turning over a hand, immediately discovered the tattered wall full of bronze pheasant charcoal brush drawing, mostly people's names, lower place more than half have been unclear, or were smeared by people, or overlapped, just a few high places, there are also some clearly can see the name, Song Ji Xian, Ji Kue, Xiao Yao, Xiesher, Chao Shi. Very long a long string, estimated that year riding on the neck, even standing on the shoulder of the little fellow wrote, Ning Yao even saw Lu Xianyang and Chen Ping'an, Goose and three people name, gathered on the left upper corner most place, seems not too harmonious with the collective. Ning Yao retracted his gaze, asked, no matter how you say it, the first step is done, has made Lao Yuan the first time to breathe. Next you really want to go to the small town to retrieve the wooden bow. Can it be too risky? In case Lao Yuan is really careful, does not go up the mountain to find trouble for you, aren't you a goat entering the tiger's mouth? The straw shoe youth has always been in a quiet breath, breathing heavy or light, long or short is also undetermined, all just look at the feeling, pursuing the most comfortable state, hearing the voice behind the eyes firmly said, there is no way, the wooden bow must want to retrieve, otherwise our previous efforts will be in vain. Moreover, I am in the muddy gorge over there, towards Lao Yuan shot an arrow over the head, it is indeed like Miss Ning you said, even if it is such a close distance, but as long as it does not hit Lao Yuan's eyeball, causing injury, can be ignored. Ning Yao was a little annoyed, earlier said, you those little talents are useless. Before you don't believe, and don't listen to advice, do, I will leave you, but now if you believe, should always follow my method. In fact for how to deal with Xinjiang mountain old Yuan, at that time in Langqiao discussed this matter young girl, the earliest is to decide each to do each, Chen Ping'an is just to make young girl wait for him to return to small town to find three people, but behind young girl suddenly changed his mind, in Ning Yao go to Langqiao north down the stairs in front, catch up with Ning Yao. Afterward two people appeared two really big different, knife also sword young girl, from the beginning very determined, you Chen Ping'an are not cultivation person, even fist skill also won't, just on one side watching the performance well, at most support waving flag cheering, make her come to kill Lao Yuan, for Lu Xianyang revenge, a heart of hatred. But as when Chen Ping'an asked her how to kill Lao Yuan, Ning Yao life and death do not want to say, only said she has that bottom of the box ability, travel the world, up mountains and down mountains, great path alone, no family heirloom killer move how can. Chen Ping'an did not respond. Only then has the moment after Chen Ping'an 3 times looking for people. Chen Ping'an stood up, twisted waist, almost no hindrance stagnation, stood up said, I rested to almost different. Ning Yao surprised said, Yang family foe z thing so useful. Chen Ping'an appeared for a moment with a gloomy look, but quickly raised his head and said with a smile, very useful. Ning Yao asked, can old Yuan directly see through your escape route? Chen Ping'an thought for a moment and carefully replied, maybe it is possible. Ning Yao used the knife sheath on the ground to draw 2 circles and 1 straight, asked, "This is the small temple and the road between Fululiza Street, your wooden palace is hidden on the other side." Chen Ping'an squatted down, drew a circle, to the east, "It is almost this place, the distance from Ni Ping Alley is not too far." Ning Yao nodded and said, "All right, even if Lao Yuan directly came to the small temple on this side, I will also prolong his steps, let you rush to arrive, there is enough time." Chen Ping'an again at that middle line of the road, used his finger to draw a small circle. "If it is really this kind of worst situation, Miss Ning, can you lure him to this place? It is the place I entered the mountain before, so I can catch the wooden palace and run to the place, it won't take long." A dark green robed young lady took the knife and stood there, arrogantly saying, "Who knows, when that time comes I will bring along the old Yuan head, go to your side." Chen Ping'an shook his head and said, "Don't be reckless, be careful." Ning Yao wished she could hold the knife sheath and forcefully knock that head. In the end, who is being reckless? She glared and said, "Hey! Standing in front of you, is me Ning Yao, the future #1 sword immortal in the world, okay?" The young man stood up, lowered his head to examine the 2 pouches on his waist, in case he would tighten them again, raised his head and smiled and said, already know, so then no matter what, don't die in this kind of small place, otherwise more or less later when you become such a great figure, as friends, I also like to get involved." Ning Yao said with emotion, "Chen Ping'an, you are such an indecisive old woman, I advise you not to marry a wife in the future, and to randomly find a woman to marry." The young man snorted, and did not refute. Just as he was about to leave the temple, Ning Yao said, "I will first send you to the small stream over there, and I will go to the northwest direction for a while. In case Lao Yuan is worried about that little girl's safety, he will not leave the bamboo forest for long, but because he did not find your whereabouts, he decisively gave up chasing and turned back to the small town." Chen Ping'an thought for a moment, and did not refuse. The young man and the young woman ran toward the small stream together, and the young woman invisibly gushed out like a big river, and the water was deep and silent, and the dark currents were surging. The young man's breathing was like a stream of water flowing, and the water was flowing. The weather was different. Ning Yao suddenly couldn't help but ask, "Would Bao arrowhead ointment you said this kind of herb, really useful?" The teenager replied, "Anyway, for 200 caddies more wild boar are all useful, for that old ape should also have." Ning Yao didn't speak anymore. The 2 people approached the small stream. It was exactly at that time the straw shoe teenager landed on the shore. The teenager and the girl almost simultaneously burst out of strength foot but, high stand up, jumped towards the other bank. The girl fell to the ground after grabbing the sword sheath, slowing down the steps. The remaining teenager is rushing forward to jump to gain momentum, big jump across the river, fell to the ground running quickly, seamlessly, Blink and the girl met briefly. Chen Ping'an just wanted to turn around. The girl said, "You go to the small town first, don't need to bother me." The teenager continued to move forward. While running, he turned his head to remind him, "I will take a slight detour, choose a quiet alley to enter the small town, it will probably be a little late." Ning Yao nodded. After Chen Ping'an's figure disappeared, he no longer held the hilt of his sword, and began to slowly walk towards the west. Not long after, the young girl stopped her body, squinting her eyes to look at the upstream stream in the distance. A strong figure suddenly shot quickly from the large rock on the stream toward the north bank, stopping at the young girl in front of her more than 20 steps, with a majestic aura. Old Yuan was a little confused. All around there was no hidden breath of a young man, intentionally or unintentionally glanced at the young girl's waist with a white scabbard long sword, and said with a smile, "Little girl, the person who harassed the people in the Fulu Street before, was you?" The young girl's hands pressed against the hilt of the sword, and she did not make a sound. Old Yuan curiously asked, "Little girl, before staying at the small town on the way, although you have always been hiding your head and tail, but I know your origin is not simple, absolutely not the 2 trashes of Qingfeng City and Old Dragon City, it's just that I'm very strange, between you and me, what grudges, why do you need to be like this? Or say your clan's sect, and Xinjiang Mountain have conflicts. Ning Yao did not say 2 words, the sabers at the waist simultaneously came out of the sheath, the body suddenly flashed and disappeared. The saber came forward, towards that Jinyang mountain's old ancestor protecting the mountain. Old Yuan casually raised his hand, using his arm to forcefully throw out this sharp blade. The young girl relied on her body to spin, the horizontal sword swept over, sweeping towards Old Yuan's neck. Old Yuan also used his arm to domineeringly scatter the sword wind. The young girl before the 2 moves could not be performed, also did not have close to the person entangled, and with Lao Yuan pulled out a distance, slowly walked. Lao Yuan used the extremely strong body, appraised the 2 sharp weapons level after, basically ignored the outer arm of the ribs was cut off the blood bar, laughed and said, the weapon is really not bad, moreover dare to carry 2 on the body, at first sight is on the mountain 1,000 years of the family disciple, otherwise is under the mountain first-rate noble van direct descendants. I almost had to think that you are hiding in the dark place. Another name Feng Lei Yuan Sword Cultivator. Old Yuan followed the young girl who seemed to not care at all about the footsteps of the movement, followed her figure slightly moved her gaze, and said in a deep voice, little girl, knowing that you are not afraid of being humiliated next, still will not give up, then this old man will finally give you one chance, let you report the master's origin, here later you will be beaten to death by this old man. Jingyang Mountain will not admit wrong because of this, moreover will not care where you come from, where the master comes from. Ning Yao towards this is basically just turning a blind eye, before and after is looking for this old ape real threat. She after all is not that person who has touched the threshold of the 10th level of greatly vassal king, can directly carry a head of Pan Shan Yuan. Self-admitted that he had given in too much. Old Yuan sneered and said, so unreasonable, then let you go. Old Yuan one step bypass at least female in front, raise arm fist towards young girl head, spin smash down. Young girl takes 6 sheath sword raised to block, blade straight point Old Yuan's wrist, in hand long sword fiercely stab straight Old Yuan chest, sword tip straight point Old Yuan heart point. Unexpectedly Old Yuan arm long a cocoon but down rough position, turn into 5 fingers nimbly grasp the blade, at the same time, another hand extremely suitable for his nature heart, one time tightly grasp the sword tip. Obviously, aggressive killing for fake, entice young girl recklessly draw sword for real. Born in East Baoping continent sword technique Holy Land Pan Shan Yuan, one glance immediately see this sword is not normal. Therefore Old Yuan does not hesitate to renew a breath for the second time. Not afraid of the sword tip has pushed into Old Yuan chest flesh, only inch left can stab into the heart. Ning Yao was not in a good mood, still decisively let go of the sword hilt, one side used force to draw the knife mark brushed past Lao Yuan's palm, emitted a series of piercing eardrums and metal and stone sounds. After drawing the knife, the young girl's body leaned back, her feet did not stop, and then quickly retreated and went. Sure enough, Lao Yuan leaned away, grabbed the tip of the sword and swung it later, the long sword was thrown away several dozen zhang. One leg kicked toward the young girl. The young girl originally held the sword in her right hand and lifted it up, and was kicked by Lao Yuan with one foot. A loud bang sounded, and the young girl's entire body was kicked to fly away 7 or 8 zhang, and her back was thrown down hard on the ground. She rolled a few times before using the tip of her knife to block it. The tip of her knife had penetrated the path a foot deep, and she stiffly stopped moving her body. Fortunately, the Shibing road was small and the mud was soft and spongy, and on the ground, there were occasional rocks that were smooth and not sharp. The young girl's back now didn't end up with a bloody mess. Not giving the young girl any chance to gasp for breath, a huge figure fell from above. The young girl this time pulled out her sword without any extra movements, and retreated again and again. Old Yuan still has not chased the young girl, fell to the ground after standing in place, one leg high raised, stepping on this hilt stabbed into the path of the hilt of the knife, waiting until the young girl kneeled on one knee on the ground raised her head to look back. Old Yuan added under the foot the tunnel, one leg brought the hole to step on the sword to sink deep into the ground, the hilt of the knife only parallel with the ground. Old Yuan on the face has each thread of purple gold breath slowly circulated, in the deep night seemed exceptionally dazzling, mockingly laughed and said, saber also practiced, sword also learned, half donkey half horse, nothing at all, that is such a pitiful ending. The young girl stood up, forcefully swallowed a mouthful of blood water. You only have this ability? Old Yuan shook his head and laughed and said, just now was just giving you another chance. Ning Yao took a deep breath, and said in a low voice, in my hometown, life and death battle, also do not care who the parents are. As long as you have the ability to openly kill me, that is my skill is not as good as others, my future parents know the reason of the process, at most is to come to Dong Baoping continent to find you trouble, absolutely will not implicate Qingyang mountain. So you can rest assured, let go of killing that is. This is Lao Yuan's first time hearing a young girl like that speak well, fluently, and in the impression that rarely laughs with a curtained hat young girl, is like heaven and earth. So when Lao Yuan's neck cold all over in an instant, suddenly tilted his head. A white-red streak from his neck side brushed over, the sword wind brought out a not-so-deep wound. If it is not turned back, even if it is impossible to penetrate the old Yuan Gu in one breath, it is absolutely considered as a serious injury, at that time it will really capsize the boat in the ditch, one wrong step after another, imagining that if it were to prematurely reveal its true form, it would lose its moral high ground, leading to it having no chance of survival with Qi Jingchun and Master Nguyen, not to mention wanting to implicate its own young lady, in this world alone facing all kinds of dangers. This Xingyang mountain old Yuan finally became enraged for the third time. The flying sword has not yet entered its sheath, but is circling around the young lady, flying and spinning rapidly, competing for credit to please its master. Old Yuan saw such a scene after, extremely angry, laughed and said, good, just happened to have a hard time with Song Chang Jing, next will accompany you to play well. But you understand how many pounds of flesh you have, can withstand a few heavy punches. The young girl carefully observed old Yuan on the face of purple gold, slightly frowned, compared to the guess inside the matter is not more than 3, old Yuan even though 3 times used divine ability magic, clearly still has some spare force, not to the extent of causing several major acupoint dikes to be smashed, forced to display the true body. Moreover, reducing life is a matter, facing the upper 5 realms below the human world cultivator is extremely fatal, facing a Pan Shan Yuan of course also really painful flesh, but at the same time does not have to stop, people like that is fatal. The young girl's fingers moved slightly, the long sword followed by gently rotating, smiling, no wonder my father said you Dong Baoping Zhou Xingyang mountain, not worth mentioning, always the tone of the great sword path is low, the fool has big courage, the sword energy is shallow. Old Yuan's beard and hair were standing up, roared, seeking death toward the ignorant young girl who rushed to kill. Ning Yao did not have the desire to fight, and ran towards the north. Along the way, the dangers were many, if not for this flying sword's hilt being Qi Xiang Do Nyo signboard in which the 2 words, the sword energy and divine intent simultaneously surged, moreover with the young girl's mind and soul, can be reached by the mind, the sword tip pointed, the long sword itself was like an unspoken ruleless existence, only then did old Yuan's thunderous attack of thousands of troops be blocked many times, helping the master in the tiny moment to escape. Fortunately, if it is a sword cultivator who has gone through 1,000 hardships to cultivate out of the life's object, so that it suits the heart, Lao Yuan will not have any surprise, but Lao Yuan clearly feels that this long sword coming out of its sheath, is absolutely not a strange young girl's life's flying sword. She is more like that ordinary brute walking the world, taking the convenient, divine weapon sharp weapon, only needing to seek the wind to be sharp enough. She has never gone through that gentle sword heart, nurturing the sword spirit sword cultivation great path. But the strange young girl's place, is that she is not completely a brute path, because for a martial arts grandmaster who is devoted to training the body, what she pursues is, the heaven and earth are broken, my body is immortal, if it is overwhelmed by the weapon's voice, it becomes a side door and heresy. A way to kill, the reason why old Yuan could not capture the young girl, except for the flying sword that was disturbing outside, was also the young girl's knowledge of practical mixed, sword cultivator, martial artist, chi refiner, 3 people with many aspects, pure breath released for a long time. Old Yuan really could not think of which sect of Dong Baoping continent could teach out such a rare and strange junior, so he took action even more carefully, wanting to confirm this foundation of origin. Anyway, as long as one does not approach that small town, no matter how mixed fish and dragons there are, Old Yuan on this side will not have any worries in the future. Everywhere fleeing young girl's complexion became even paler. The crossbow is at its limit. Old Yuan laughed ferociously and said, not to mention you have not resisted until you escaped back to the small town. Even if you are lucky to succeed, there are people to respond, but do you really think that this old man cannot kill you? Old Yuan, a shallow field withdraws the onion, does not with the flying sword calculate the details, directly throws over the young girl's head, stops at her path on, turns around to block the young girl toward the north path, a punch to put the handle of this flying sword mixed out more than 100 zhang, is just stubbornly licking the flying sword. Whoosh shouts a little moment angry to come, again toward Old Yuan head, when Old Yuan intends to find an opportunity to grasp the flying sword, to confine this in the palm of the hand, it knows in advance and cunningly retreats, absolutely not eager to fight, the flying sword turns back like the wind, hard to guard against. Old Yuan again, thick skin, fat flesh, not afraid of being injured, also briefly shows distress. Young girl does not want to straightforward with Old Yuan to engage, immediately the route tilts, toward the northeast direction to run quickly. Old Yuan follows sideways, before and after to the young girl creates fear. Old Yuan slapped away the flying sword from the side, like a fly, hitting the hilt of the flying sword 2 feet into the ground. The flying sword seemed to twist its waist like a woman, with great difficulty pulling itself out from the mud. In the sky, the sword tip trembled violently, like an angry wild cat, and quickly returned to its imposing manner as it charged towards Old Yuan. Old Yuan did not mind the trouble, could not help but ask out loud, this bring flying sword, why can ignore this place's rules? Yuan Qi Jingchun or Nguyen Kung, in the end what relationship? Ning Yao almost was Old Yuan, a palm print on the forehead above, the body back to lean forward at the same time, stretched out hand to grab flying sword hilt, then was forcefully released out of Old Yuan at a palm range. The whole person seemed to be pulled by someone to adjust the arm, later went around. Was dragged by flying sword a distance after, young girl did not know why, still did not take this opportunity, always retreated into the small town, but stopped body, stood up straight body after, roared head, spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. Flying sword mysteriously stopped at young girl's side, rumbled loudly, was a puzzled and incomprehensible pheasant, on the other side with elders nagging, noisy non-stop. The young girl's right hand pressed the left shoulder. Old Yuan suddenly slowed down his steps, laughing loudly said, indeed like that, accepting you as the master of this flying sword, can indeed not follow the rules to come, but the flying sword is ultimately just a flying sword, and also communicates with the profound spirit, still not as good as you little girl to command it. Unfortunately your body and soul in the small town suffered serious injuries, still not completely recovered, so basically unable to accept its control, so always intermittent, attack from its self-control. Anyway, you also did not think to really be seriously injured with this old man, just used to save life defense moves, then cannot but from your mind to control the flying sword. The young girl finally opened her mouth to speak again, you talk too much. Her lips were bright red, her complexion was snow white, a set of dark green long robe. More than half the night, the young girl is like a night walking the countryside female ghost. Old Yuan step by step forward, clicking her tongue and saying, waste a good sword, but the body is weak. If you do it strongly, it is really pitiful. You and that small alley you think of all ways to want this old man to breathe, to bring about this side of heaven and earth counterattack, little girl, now you don't mind guessing, wait for this old man's third breath to finish, replace the next breath, can finally or not attract the anger of heaven and earth. And this old man can finally not carry that round of sea water flowing back. The young girl suddenly smiled thoughtfully, the tip of her feet lightly pointed, jumped back, not more than 1 zhang high, not more than half a zhang far. Originally wanted to pursue old Yuan was a bit incomprehensible, afraid of being tricked, then continued to slowly walk forward, determined to calmly watch this change. Then the body flew up into the air. Young girl again toes a point, this time the toes foot force is a bit big, the ankle also has a twist, so all is not straight back to jump away, but is toward the right side jump and shoot away. Originally did not wait for young girl body fall, flying sword immediately skimmed at least the girl in the air the highest place under the foot, so young girl each time precisely borrowed the force, continue to backward release toward high escape. Even the world turns around. Lao Yuan also watched to be a bit stunned, before his eyes that scene, strange and funny. Young girl vaguely like a jumping square little deer, continuously jumping, filled with graceful gentle agile breath, very quickly then disappeared in the night sky. Probably worried that Lao Yuan in the middle of the road exerted force to sneak attack, young girl's jumping and shooting seems extremely unstructured, suddenly left suddenly right, suddenly high suddenly low, suddenly front suddenly back. Old Yuan pulled the corner of his mouth, his eyes complicatedly said, "Good antelope." However, old Yuan also did not watch the young girl far away, the tip of his foot picked, casually kicked up a stone, held it in his palm, and fiercely attacked it towards the sky. Each stone was quickly taken out of the ground by old Yuan, and finally in old Yuan's hand, he used the wind and thunder to roll around, and shot it away. Although most of the stones failed, there were still 7 or 8 stones that created a huge threat to the young girl, forcing her to control her flying sword to shatter the flying stone. In the night sky, rumbling sounds shook, like spring thunder blooming. Old Yuan's eyes were gloomy. That young girl was either a heartless wind, or a heartless eye. She could clearly control her flying sword in one breath, and raise it so high that the flying stone had the power of the sky. She deliberately maintained a high level of loftiness, like a light cavalry traveling on the battlefield's frontier, luring the enemy crossbowmen to continuously exhaust their arrows and stamina. Unconsciously, she had already approached the small town to the west. Old Yuan roughly estimated a little remaining breath, remaining not much, specialized initiating 2 big like pheasant bronze fist stone, one hand one front leg kick, one hand cocoon out, bulging muscle high bulging, seeing terrifying, in hand flying stone broke the air, but scolded shaking, chaotic a long chain of fire star, completely different from usual, like a delicate fire dragon shot up high. Old Yuan shouted loudly, "Let me down." High sky place, lit up a brilliant electric light, after that his spring thunder exploded loudly. Girl screamed, whole person began to fall down. Swaying crooked like drunk man, same flying sword, constantly moaning and sobbing, but still desperately rushed towards the owner. Old Yuan also did not bother to look at the young girl and the flying sword, instead squinted her eyes and looked straight at the small town west of the roof on the other side. When a black shadow moved out, old Yuan forcefully stepped out, another leg in hand. There was still a rock left, screaming and going, happily laughing loudly saying, "Save people and pretend to be dead first." Young girl vomited blood and shouted, "Don't come out." Originally the injury was not light. Young girl could not bear to go and see. That moment, she was a bit desperate, with difficulty grabbed the hilt of the sword, when one arm could not support it, quickly changed hands to hold the sword, like that repeated, continuously slowing down and falling speed. Ning Yao did not think, but she thought herself smart, killed that young boy. Young boy wore straw shoes, carried a basket, used a basket fish, like the wind was the same, every day came back in a hurry, hurriedly earned money and hurriedly bought medicine. Ning Yao felt like this young man just like that died, like that is not right. Young girl swaying fall to the ground after, the 2 fingers closed as sword, resisting the forehead between the eyebrows place, gritted teeth said, "Come out. Let me cut open this direction of heaven and earth." There is a very small golden thread in the young girl between the eyebrows, from the top down, gradually spread. Like immortals' open heavenly eye. Ancient arch bridge under, now Lang Qiao inside. There is a sword tip pointing toward the lake water. Do not know how many thousand years rusty old sword, like from deep sleep wake up person, yawn. Rusty mottled sword tip gently sway flash. Therefore lang chiao sway flash. The entire spring water also sway flash. The entire small world also follows sway flash. A deep mountain between, dusty tired chi jing chun. Total number of people make friends leave the mountain, this slowly walk on the mountain road. Teaching teacher, one leg lifted up after, just want to suddenly step down, smile, slowly set foot. Young jia fo tu backyard old head raised, sitting on the oil lamp side hit doze, wake up after, use old pipe cough table top, die li feudal lord song chong jing, for no reason in the office stomping feet cursing motherfucker. The blacksmith displayed a room Zhu Jian room, in charge of punching and beating Nguyen Kung, but a hammer failed, holding the sword to adjust the horsetail of the young girl, full of fear. Being regarded as a fool by everyone in Han Hoa Alley, young Ma Ko Huin, originally lying on the roof looking at the night sky, suddenly sat up, full of murderous intent. But at this time, there was a familiar voice extremely worried and sounded, getting closer and closer, Miss Nin, what are you standing there for? Run. I didn't die, that was because I took off a piece of clothes. Old beast's brain is not good at using, why are you all so dizzy? The young girl was already somewhat unconscious, in the edict ceremony about to announce the great achievement, suddenly felt the whole person was like flying clouds, let people carry on the shoulder and ran towards the small town alley. Ning Yao instantly sobered up, her body followed a certain young man's shoulder, constantly shaking up and down, a little uncomfortable, even more unbearable, she was completely dumbfounded. Who? Chapter 53 Present. Chen Pingyan carried the young girl all the way running like crazy, running away was even faster than before going up the mountain, like a thief snatching chrysanthemums. Ning Yao suffered internal injuries that were not light, and was shaking uncomfortably, but she did not care about any face. If at this time she gave Lao Yuan a punch, judging by her and Chen Pingyan, she would really want to die for love. Ning Yao's forehead was full of sweat, asking, how did you survive? No rocks were hit. How did you know that Lao Yuan was preparing behind, it was aimed at you and not me? After asking a long series of questions, Ning Yao suddenly woke up, don't talk about this and that first, take advantage of Lao Yuan's request to breathe, you can run very far, very far. I have made that sword try my best to entangle Lao Yuan, but it is estimated that it cannot be stretched for very long. The straw shoe youth lightly nodded, walking like flying, in the familiar large and small alleys passed by, like a fish tail wandering with the stream. Leaving the small town to the west that small street after, Chen Pingyan still walked without stopping, took some time to explain in a low voice, previously in the other side of the Ni Ping alley, Lao Yuan was tricked by me to go to a pile of broken rooms on the roof, then he fell into the hole, later I secretly threw a piece of small broken tiles on the hole next to the room. Sure enough Lao Yuan thought I was not careful, revealed the sound of footsteps, he suddenly pushed out a piece of roof tiles, even the wall brought the wall and the roof together to hit through, scared me to the point of cold sweat. Just now I was actually on the other side of the roof, not daring to stick my head out, afraid that you would be distracted, also thinking whether I could give Lao Yuan an arrow, then saw Lao Yuan smash you down onto that rock, along with a fire snake that seemed to be hanging in the air, judging that as long as you raise your head, everyone in our small town can see, how could I dare to be careless? At that time my mind turned a corner, thinking that if it were me talking, I would definitely use you as bait, first dodge in the dark, then turn around to collect the light, one bait hooked 2 fish, really good, right? So I immediately took off Lu Xianyang's clothes first, threw them away, then dared to go save you. Ning Yao's eyes lit up, clicked his tongue and said strangely, then couldn't understand and started to settle the score, Chen Pingyan, these scheming schemes, who did you learn from? Pretending to be righteous, definitely not so honest on the surface. Say. The 6 Taoists who saved me that time, in your Naping Alley ancestral home, you besides taking off your hood and curtain, did you finally take the opportunity to take advantage of me? Chen Pingyan was confused for a while, just like when he was young, he was thrown a cow's tail on his face, not much different, what? The young girl actually didn't continue to raise her voice to question him, instead worried about herself, laughing out loud. Chen Pingyan is greedy for money, absolutely not lustful. Ning Yao has no doubt about this, just like she always firmly believes that she will definitely become a great sword immortal in the future, not some phoenix feathers and unicorn horns, can be counted on the fingers, but is the only one of me. Ning Yao said in a low voice, "Put me down." Chen Pingyan asked, "Can you walk by yourself?" Ning Yao helplessly said, "Temporarily still can't go, but if you run down like this again, my heart, liver, and spleen will be driven crazy by you. At that time, if you don't get hit by Lao Yuan's fist and die on your shoulder, Lao Yuan will still be laughed to death by us." Chen Pingyan slowed down his steps, and said with a headache, "Then what? Find a place to hide recently? I originally thought of leaving the small town, that place is not easy to be found by people." Ning Yao suddenly remembered something, and asked curiously, "Where is that piece of homemade wooden armor of yours? Why aren't you wearing it on your body?" Chen Pingyan bitterly smiled and said, "Dealing with Lao Yuan, the meaning is not big, on the contrary it will affect my escape speed, so I simply take it off. Also such a waste of effort, otherwise I also do not know how to bring you away from there, can't carry, can't hug, thinking about it gives me a headache." Ning Yao sighed, determined to say, "Chen Pingyan, first put me down, then carry me to the place you said." Chen Pingyan naturally had no objection, not the slightest bit. Wet and dirty then followed, carrying the young girl on his back, continued to run, asking, "Miss Ning, where is your knife? How come there is only the sheath?" Hugging the young girl's neck, the young girl angrily said, "Bury in the ground." Chen Pingyan also did not ask much, ran towards the place where a person was sweating outside the small town. The mountain forest was desolate, around where each long since no descendants worshipped the grave weed spread, lush to be like a vegetable garden, often resounded a few night kite cry, wave after wave, really terrifying. Fortunately Chen Pingyan to this place, had brought a kind of pure never had feelings, but actually did not feel how unwell. Approximately an incense stick later, Chen Pingyan carried the young girl, passed through countless broken limbs, broken bones, collapsed idol, circled to a very large idol behind, the clay idol tilted on the ground, did not know why, had not seen the head, height 2 zhang more than enough, can imagine. This statue had been completely completed sitting upright with the temple ancestral hall between, is how majestic and imposing. Chen Pingyan squatted down, intending to first put Ning Yao down. The result waited for a while. She actually did not move, scared to the point that Chen Pingyan thought that Miss Ning had died halfway up the road. At the moment Chen Pingyan was struck by lightning, seemed to be dumbfounded on the spot, not a word, did not agree with each other at the time. This along the way comfortably slept a lot past young girl, finally woke up, instinctively used the back of the hand to wipe the corner of the mouth, asked in a daze, "Arrived?" Squatting on the ground young man at this moment, even himself did not think, after all almost tears all had to flow out. The young man ran quickly, took a deep breath, restrained the unusual emotions, the pair of hands gently let go of the young girl's leg away, turned his head and smiled and said, "This is me. Last year autumn temporarily built a small room, before often brought Gu Shan to this place to play. He was noisy and wanted to roll around, so used a wood chopping knife to cut some branches to build a shelf, and then used the grass leaves to cover it up. Still very hard. Last year winter like this big too. Snows, also did not collapse." Ning Yao straightened his body, turned his head to look back. The flying sword still had not yet returned in a miserable state. This was a good sign, at least explained that Lao Yuan had not found the right two people hiding place direction. Chen Pingyan made Ning Yao wait for a moment, took the lead to bend down and enter the grass temporarily built small OA, roughly cleaned up, only then opened the door to welcome guests. Ning Yao sat in and did not appear narrow and cramped small OA, as if relieved of a burden. Chen Pingyan did not close that rough wooden door, but sat at the door, with his back to the young girl. Ning Yao asked, "How is it not related to the door?" Chen Pingyan shook his head and said, "If old Yuan finds this place, it is no different. Sitting cross-legged, Ning Yao nodded and said, "It is also." After a moment of silence, Ning Yao asked, "You do not have anything to ask?" Chen Ping'an indeed asked, "Old Yuan, did you use up 3 breaths?" Ning Yao hummed, "But to tell you a bad little stream, Old Yuan can at least break the rules once again. Dealing with the two of us 2 injuries, more than half is more than enough." Chen Ping'an asked again, "Miss Ning, how much do you think Old Yuan paid for this?" The little OA inside was filled with the green grass fragrance all around, permeating the intestines, although the ground was a little moist, but the young girl felt that she could not ask for more. Ning Yao thought carefully. Old Yuan took action 3 times in total, from your house in the nipping alley to the smallest town in the west. For the first time, Old Yuan was relatively restrained, mainly because he wanted to test whether you had no support. After all, at that time he was afraid of someone behind the scenes plotting, afraid that someone would target him to escort here Xingyang Mountain Little Master. So his life expectancy was roughly only between 3 and 4 years. Later in Shi Ban and me were at odds, 20 years left in Rig. HT, the 3rd time, it was estimated to be at least 50 years, next the 4th time, it would take 100 years to start. Chen Ping'an eyes were bright, bent down and stretched out a grass, brushed off the mud after, chewed in the mouth, happily said, "Even if it's 180 years, it's too much. Even if you don't consider that Yunhe mountain that Tai surnamed woman framed, ordinary people will only live for 60 years, I'm just making a profit for 2 lifetimes. Speaking of which, Lao Yuan's nearly 200 years of life, to my turn, my 3 lifetimes of life, I feel that he only needs to imagine this, his anger will also die." Ning Yao frowned and said, "Chen Ping'an, you just like that feel that your life is not worth money?" Chen Ping'an said without hesitation, "Compared with Lao Yuan, that kind of 1,000-year-old immortal monster, I'm a small-town Yao Gong-born commoner, naturally not worth money, admitting this kind of thing, and not losing face." Ning Yao was choked to death by Chen Ping'an's sophistry. Tran Bin turned his head and smiled, "Of course, think about it, accept fate to accept fate, in the heart there will still be resentment, you think by what means all our next life to go on a trip, my fate is born not worth money?" Ning Yao just wanted to agree, then boasted with him a few words of brave and heroic spirit and learned insider knowledge sage sayings. Unexpectedly the young man very quickly gave himself an answer, formally put his hand on his chest and asked himself, "Could it be that I did good deeds in my previous life? But I have not had time to do any good deeds in this life, in the next life, wouldn't I still have to finish my life, what to do?" Ning Yao took the green sheath knife on his thigh, used the sheath to gently poke the young man behind his back. The straw shoe young man immediately bared his teeth and glared, turned his head with an angry expression and didn't dare to say anything. Ning Yao glared and said, "This life has not yet come to an end, what do you think about the next life?" Chen Ping'an ran quickly and stretched out a finger, signaling Ning Yao not to raise her voice. The young girl ran quickly and shut her mouth. Chen Ping'an but moved outside the boundary, intending to get away from the young girl and the scabbard. Ning Yao wanted to say something but stopped, finally decided to still tell the truth to the young boy, hoarsely said, "Chen Ping'an, have you thought about it, although his life has been reduced by 180 years, but this Xingyang mountain guarding the mountain garden, how long could he have lived originally?" Turning his back to the young girl and looking at the young boy in the distance, he just shook his head. This kind of mysterious and difficult to explain matter, how could the young boy know? Probably even if he wanted to break his head he still couldn't guess the answer. There are some things, like the bluestone streets of Fulu Street and Taoya Alley, if the young man had not passed on a message, he would never have known in this life that the roads in this world were not completely muddy. Ning Yao sighed and said, "This kind of heaven and earth strange phenomenon that gives birth to ferocious beasts, the aperture hole is far from us people who come from different caves. Although because of this cultivation is very difficult, but the good thing is that the spirit and energy flow, also more leisurely, making extremely long life, slow than 500 years, at most 5,000 years of life. Pan Shan Yuan is naturally good-natured, not moving, happy and quiet, if not cultivating, life will not be too long, naturally not as good as the return of the branch, but Pan Shan Yuan is after all once a hegemon, life expectancy is still as long as 2,000 years old. Moreover, this head of Shan Yuan, obviously has cultivated the Tao method divine ability, once he is stepped into the upper 5 realms by him, moreover his 9th realm body, not to mention 2,000 years of life, even 3,000 years, 4,000 years, is not impossible. Ning Yao looked at that skinny silhouette, so don't feel that you've lived enough. Chen Pingyan didn't groan. Ning Yao was a little sour. Hai didn't say anything, speaking out the secret of the young girl in her heart gradually gave birth to a little guilty, then dug out all her heart and went to cherish and find words, thinking to comfort that guy. Just when Ning Yao thought of the head was all grown up, she heard the straw shoe teenager a very small snoring sound. Ning Yao immediately opened her mouth. Xinghua Alley deep in a pile of big buildings, from inside to outside cleaned up to clean, even the courtyard entrance road, also compared to other people's house door is much cleaner. A general appearance and a kind face, absolutely no charm. Old lady chooses the lamp wick, makes the room and the oil lamp more bright a little, then full of indulgence and looks towards her grandson, begins year after year day after day nagging, more than half of the night again run to the roof to do what? The saying says spring covers autumn and winter is cold, you always do not listen to advice, indeed is the time when the body grows, really want to freeze out the disease root to death, as a grandmother how to live. The foolish and stupid teenager smirks. The old lady sat down behind, sighed, and began to recite her own family's difficult scriptures. My good grandson, you don't know, today in the daytime, that white-eyed wolf didn't know what to hear, suddenly carrying a large bag of small gifts to the door, you weren't home at that time, you didn't see his face, what a filial son and kind father, almost moved grandma to tears. Speaking to this point, the old woman full of sarcasm, suddenly toward the ground spit out a mouthful of sputum, and also a little regretful, then quickly ran to use the tip of the foot to crush. The old woman raised her head to look toward the full face of the indifferent youth, angry blood boiling, just reluctant to hit, had to huff and puff, heartless brat, also don't know the heartache and sorrow of the old woman. Your real name is called Ma Xian, just born with a father but not taught by a mother, not a miserable fate is what, the old woman will give you an extra miserable word, if you are afraid of bad luck, later on you will change yourself back, it doesn't matter, don't need to care about the old woman's ideas. The old woman is just a wild old woman, is a field toad, shallow knowledge, deserves to be punished and suffer all her life. The old woman began to wipe away her tears. The young Ma Ku Xian stretched out his hand and placed it on the old woman's dry, bony back of her hand. The old lady looked at her grandson, the young man's eyes finally carried a bit of affection, she smiled happily, and patted Ma Kushuan's hand. My grandmother is an unlucky person, your grandfather has a conscience but no ability, is not trustworthy, the son has ability but no conscience, is still not trustworthy, so there is only you left with such thoughts. If you have no future, this grandmother has suffered so much in this life, consider it as eating for free. Suffering is nothing, don't be like your grandmother, in the future you must have a future, have a great future, who bullies you too much, you will be bullied to death, never be a good person, a bad person, occasionally be a few times, it's okay, don't be single-minded and eat your fill and go harm people, be careful and you will get retribution, right? God likes to sleep all year round, but there is always a time when you open your eyes, in case the claw fits just right, AIU. These rotten rice and rotten sesame saying, the teenager has heard it since childhood, probably the ear has a cocoon, but it has changed a few cocoons. However, the teenager has not withdrawn his hand, letting his grandmother gently hold it. The old lady suddenly asked, what do you like Ji Kue that little maid for? The teenager smiled and said, beautiful worship. The old lady slightly increased the force on the back of Ma Ku Xian's hand and slapped it, loudly scolding, unscrupulous little slut. Even the grandmother here is not willing to tell the truth. The teenager laughed, Grandma, you can rest assured, it is a good thing. The old lady half believed and half doubted, temporarily suppressed this question, and changed the topic, do you know why your parents don't need you? The young man laughed and said, at that time, the family was poor, and could not support me. The old woman suddenly raised her voice and shouted, "Poor? We my family, 7 or 8 generations old, are really not considered poor families, and are also the descendants of the estate. In the end, even the rich do not know how to deal with it. In fact, the old ancestor left behind a family rule, and even if there is money, they would not allow the house to be settled in Fulushang Street, and Taoya Alley would not allow it. That person deserves to be struck down by lightning by his parents. If they were poor, could they wear gold and silver every day? Live a life of luxury? Except for not daring to move away from the 4 families and 10 clans gathering place to show off their wealth, what good things did they enjoy and fall into a pile of one piece of cloth? Every time talking about son and daughter-in-law, old woman really hates to the point of itching teeth, coldly laughs and says, "Those ancestral rules, are buried underground and turned into mud, many years have passed, now can be worth how much money? Grandson, your future, don't be too concerned about things, grandma has lived a bunch of years, seen many rich and poor people, in the end, only people without ability, will go to be honest people." Ma Ku Xian smiles brightly, not knowing whether to feel it makes sense, or to think it's funny. This young man has been like this since he was young, anything tiring can eat, anything bullying can endure, but there are some things that are stubborn, even his grandmother also advises him to not listen. The old lady thought for a moment, stood up and ran out to see the courtyard door transmigration, returned to the house once again after sitting down, lowered her voice, "Grandson, don't look at grandma for so many years pretending to be a ghost, except for being a midwife, is to give people a cup of talisman water to drink, otherwise is thick-skinned and people collect tattered, but grandma told you, those retrieved to the old things, but are all the top treasures." The young man once again restored his lazy demeanor, obviously, for grandma that a big tattered chest, Ma Ku Xian is also not interested. The old lady still recounted the youth all kinds of more and more but trickery techniques, full of pride. Ma Ku Xian suddenly asked, "Grandma, Naping Ali Chen Ping and his father, did he die in?" The old lady's face changed dramatically, she quickly reached out to cover her grandson's mouth, and said cruelly, "There are some things, can be done, cannot be said." The young man smiled and nodded, not asking to the end. After that, the old lady also did not show off her past glory interest, sickly, her mind was heavy, often looking outside the window at the night scene. Ma Ku Xian smiled and asked, "Grandma, you have been in our small town for so many years as a shaman, the neighbors of Xinghua Alley, everyone said that your old man can overcome the separation of yin and yang, and guide the souls back to the mortal world." The old lady disdainfully said, "Others believe these miasma, you also believe? Grandma is afraid of even lightning, really want to see ghosts, still can't scare yourself to death. Grandma, don't be afraid." The young Ma Kushuan laughed softly, "Humans and ghosts are enemies, and gods are different. The great path leads to the sky, everyone goes to one side. Dawn time." Grass and trees. Little OA inside Ning Yao slowly opened her eyes. Didn't see the youth's figure whereabouts. She quickly stood up, bent down to walk out, toes pointed, she jumped to that old and dilapidated idol's huge shoulder above. Far away Straw Shoe Youth was running towards this side, footsteps were not hurried nor slow, not like being chased. When he saw the dark green young girl behind, ran quickly, waved her hand to signal her to come down. Ning Yao jumped down the Buddha statue's shoulder, stood in front of the youth. "Old Yuan can't find us here." After speaking, Chen Ping An's face towards that headless idol, clasped hands before chest, bowed head once, shattered recited. Ning Yao vaguely heard was pleading not to blame her language, her eyes rolled white, but also didn't say anything. After a while, Chen Ping'an mysteriously said in a low voice, "I brought you to see 2 idols, very interesting." Ning Yao asked, "Is it a bodhisattva who appeared, willing to come out to see you? Isn't that sincere?" Chen Ping'an resentfully said, "Miss Ning, you said this." Ning Yao raised her eyebrows. Chen Ping'an was struck by lightning and continued to say, "I just heard it from a book." Ning Yao instantly changed her entire person, coughed a few times, and silently recited timidly in her heart. The young man in front led the way, the young woman silently followed behind. Ning Yao instinctively stretched out a finger, rubbing between her eyebrows. What a mysterious fate. The young woman and the human fought for a long time, took a deep breath, and then weakly said 2 words, "Xia xia." The young man actually kept his eyes on the 6 roads and ears, listening in all directions, naturally hearing the young lady suddenly happened to thank him, although deep inside, he didn't feel that she asked him to say thank you, on the contrary, he should thank her. However, Chen Pingyan really didn't know how to open his mouth, so he resolutely didn't react to this investigation. Chen Pingyan suddenly stopped his steps, blankly looked towards the south, muttered, "If Lao Yuan has been expelled by Mr. Qi, so he didn't chase us, what should we do now?" The young lady had nothing to say. Chen Pingyan continued to walk ahead, not seeing anything unusual. Ning Yao quickened his steps, walking side by side with him, couldn't help but ask, "Chen Pingyan, are you okay?" Chen Pingyan shook his head and said, "It's nothing. I know there are some things, it's like that, there's no way, there's no way." The young man had not read the book, so he did not know the meaning of that sentence. If we change the way of speaking, it is called the end of human resources. Ning Yao suddenly stopped her steps, waiting until the young man turned around in doubt. She pointed at the red mark between her eyebrows, "Knowing you are curious, but not having the face to ask, I don't mind telling you the truth, this is my Ning Yao's killer move. Xingyang Shan's old yuan is formidable, right? Took you and me away to the point where it was even more miserable than a dog in mourning, right? But my aura hole inside, and my mother gave me the same 10-year-old birthday present, it is my life-saving thing, as long as it appears, don't say old Yuan wants to die, it is." Speaking up to here, the young girl cut off the conversation, directly jumped over, "The reason I'm talking to you about this, I want to tell you, the world is truly great, don't look down on yourself, don't be discouraged, aren't you already practicing martial arts? Why don't you even practice swordsmanship together?" Chen Pingyan asked, "You will teach swordsmanship?" Ninju said reasonably, "My natural talent is too good, I learned swordsmanship very early, my realm climbed very quickly, but I will not teach others swordsmanship at all." Tranbinan scratched his head. Ning Yao thought for a moment, and said with a serious face, "Even if I wanted to give this flying sword to you, it would not agree, and I also do not want to humiliate it like that. In my hometown, those who think that the world has a spirit sword are all my fellow Taoists." Ning Yao finally took off the snow-white scabbard from her waist, "But this sword scabbard I can give to you." Chen Pingyan did not understand, why. Ning Yao patted Chen Pingyan's shoulder with all her might, and said with a profound voice, "Even the scabbard is there, how far is it from being a sword immortal?" Chen Pingyan stupidly accepted the empty scabbard, and stared at it with a choked voice, "What did you say?" Ning Yao quickly walked ahead. At that time, the young girl only felt that she had done an extremely carefree thing, that was all. Tranbinan carefully carried the sword sheath, wondering where he could find the sword. Chapter 54 Confronting the Strong Enemy. Tranbinan led Ninju to enter a 5-colored idol in front, approximately compared to the strong man taller than a head, originally born with 3 pairs of arms, now only left the highest place to hold hands, one hand, high raised, together with the lowest place, shake hands, one hand. The reason why a single arm can shake hands, originally is the idol 10 fingers intertwined, so even if the other arm is severed shoulder to shoulder, the hand and method are still to remain. 5-colored earthen idol for a god wearing armor, big beard, armor painting, scales continuously, armor plate side strength has 2 pearl lines, pearl beads full, compared to Lu Xian Yang family ancestral monkey armor ugly unbearably, just half a mouth to say, really is Ji Kuei and Ma grandmother difference. The idol stepped on a square pitch-black stone throne, compared to last night's 2 people who were living off the headless idol. This colored pattern idol although had many severed arms, the statue's color was mottled, but it still exuded a kind of spirit and spirit. The most important thing was the clay statue's waist and abdomen, the hands were intertwined together, the posture was extremely strange. Ning Yao glanced and saw the clue, understood why Chen Ping'an had to rush to bring himself here, nodded and said, indeed it is a bit similar to the greedy mountain platform that stood on the pole of the fist, but it is a bit different from the sword furnace on the power platform. Ning Yao pondered for a moment, asked, are there any other severed arms found nearby? Chen Ping'an squatted on the ground, his face full of regret as he shook his head and said, going to look, couldn't find anything, probably already trampled by the children who came to this place to play hide and seek. So many years down, these earth gods and mud bodhisattvas probably have eaten all kinds of suffering. You look at this one, the supreme fist, the end there is missing a big piece, beside it there are also many cracks, obviously for people to use slingshots or kicked and broken. The children of the small town are all like this, the adults don't let them come here to play, so they like to sneak here to catch crickets, dig wild vegetables, especially every year when it snows. There are often dozens of people here to play snowballs. It's really lively. After playing crazy, where can you get anything? When I was young, I also liked to compete, see who can climb higher. There are also people who like to crawl to the top of the idol's head to pee. Compared to others the urine reaches farther, so you think every year down, then not a complete clay statue. Actually when I was young also had a few carved wooden idols, later heard that someone was lazy hate to go up the mountain to chop wood too tired, so followed them. Just entered winter at that time, then stole to drag back home chop into firewood to burn and destroy. The youth has always been there mumbling, somewhat lowly pity, I was at that time despised by Yao old man, Xiao Yao did not understand, chased to the mountain to burn charcoal, if I in town know there is someone doing like that, must advise, really cannot, I can agree to help him chop wood. Earth and wood god mud bodhisattva, although said never manifested, but that good or bad is also bodhisattva god the result was smashed into firewood, this kind of immoral matter, how can do it? Ning Yao and Chen Ping'an at this moment pay attention to the key point, completely different. Ning Yao pinched his chin with one hand, raised his elbow with the other, his eyes were sparkling, and he slowly said, if I didn't guess wrong, your Quan Pu sword furnace was indeed born here, but it wasn't the pair of hands you see now, but this Taoist spirit official like the opponent's front middle arm, it was from the disappearing pair of hands that pressed the hand to chant the incantation that the sword furnace came out. Although I don't know why the creator of Quan Pu only chose the first, and there was no choice now that we saw this hand gesture, but I can confirm a little, the sword furnace, or say the spirit official only pressed the hand to chant the incantation, perhaps there is a big or small difference. Chen Ping'an heard as if he was caught in a fog, but he didn't forget to retort and remind, Quan Pu is Gu San, I am the custodian. Ning Yao did not argue with Chen Ping'an, stretched out his hand and pointed at this Taoist spirit coffin sword furnace rack, explaining, look, Quan Pu on the right hand tail only rushed out, and here is 9 fingers separately entangled, circled, and bowed, only extended the left hand a forefinger only, one branch is unique. Because it is pinching the finger into a sword technique, finally used to nourish the forefinger. Ning Yao worried himself said, I have been walking all over this world for many years, also seen many temples of the 4 great heavenly kings, and various roads to see the spirit coffin, this clay statue. Chen Ping'an waited slowly below, the result waited for half a day also did not wait for the answer, only had to open his mouth to ask, is there anything strange? Ning Yao nodded, solemnly said, it is a dwarf. The young man squatting on the ground did not say anything, just extended his thumb to her. Ning Yao turned his head and asked, have you seen a higher Taoist sect spirit statue than your Fei Yun mountain? Of course I have not seen it. Chen Ping'an was stunned, and said doubtfully, Fei Yun mountain is our side? Ning Yao woke up and explained, it is your place's highest mountain, a long, long time ago. It is said that there was once a Taoist master who ambushed a heavenly master seal on the other side of Fei Yun mountain, used to suppress this side's heaven and earth dragon energy. Chen Ping'an's eyes lit up, know roughly the location, can we dig it? Ning Yao smiled and said, what, want to dig it up and sell it for money? Being exposed the truth Chen Ping'an slightly blushed, frankly and sincerely said, the island does not necessarily have to sell money, as long as it is a good and valuable thing, keeping it in the house as a family heirloom is also good. Ning Yao used his finger to point at the guy who dropped the money in his eyes, angrily said, "In the future, if you can establish a sect, I estimate that with you like a swallow with a muddy mouth, a housekeeper with a sect master, disciples and guests under you, you will definitely have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of your life, and enjoy the blessings." Chen Pingyan did not think that far. As for what establishing a sect, even more so, he could not understand. He stood up and asked, "Regardless of big or small, right now it can be considered a sword furnace?" Ning Yao nodded and said, "Big and small sword furnace, divided into left and right hands, the real nourishment object, is absolutely not the left hand index finger and right hand tail pointing, but is a line upstream and up, straight to." Ning Yao said to this time, closed her eyes and concentrated. She did not even need to press her hand to chant the incantation to establish a stake, was able to feel it. She opened her eyes and then curled her fingers, pointed to the back of her head 2 places, respectively jade pillow and pillar of heaven. 2 acupoints, indeed is relatively suitable to nourish the life-flying sword place. She smiled and said, "Left hand sword furnace corresponds to this place, right hand is pointing to this place." Chen Pingyan said in confusion, "Miss Ning, actually I have always wanted to ask, this sword furnace is said to be the fist principle to establish a stake, but fingers like this are twisted and twisted, this and practicing fist in the end what relation? Can it extend the strength?" Ning Yao slightly gaped. If it was not for Ning Yao to specifically explain martial arts or cultivation sects, then it would be too embarrassing for her, let alone let her speak along the way, big and small, ho ho ho, how to smoothly pass. After all, for Ning Yao herself, these most uninteresting principles, still need to be said. Isn't it natural to be so familiar with the door and the path? Therefore the young girl frowned and lectured the young man saying, "The realm hasn't arrived, talking and talking is useless. What are you asking so much for, only care about burying your head in hard training. How, can't bear the hardship?" Chen Pingyan half believed and half doubted, very carefully said, "Miss Ning, is it really like that?" Ning Yao crossed her arms in front of her chest, her face full of righteous expression, asked back, "Otherwise?" Tran Binan did not pursue this matter, raised his head to look at the colored patterned Taoist spirit coffin statue that Nin Jie called, and said, "This is their Taoist priest Luke's immortal." Ning Yao helplessly said, "What do you call their 6th Taoist priest's immortals?" First, Taoism, although there is a family name, but it is absolutely not the family of your small-town common people. Taoism is big, far beyond your imagination. Even I am not very clear about the Taoist sect in the end how many Taoist sects there are, in the end how many mountain branches there are, only heard my father say. Now the ancestral temple is divided into 4 buildings in the north and south. Count, to you saying this is like playing the lute to a cow. Second, immortals, although you are used to chanting together, even the common people in the world are the same, but in the end, immortals and immortals, take different paths. I will give a good example. People fight for a puff of air, Buddha fights for a stick of incense. Have you heard these words? Chen Pingyan nodded and said, "Before, Xinghua Ma's grandmother often quarreled with Gu San's mother, I can always hear this saying." Ning Yao at this time very much has some meaning of pointing out the country, Buddha fighting for a stick of incense. Why want to fight? Because the gods really require incense. If there is no incense, the gods will gradually weaken, eventually losing a body of boundless magic power. The reason is very simple, just like a person who has not eaten grain for several days, where does the strength come from? Why does the secular court have to ban lewd words everywhere? I am afraid that the human world's incense smoke is chaotic, causing some people who should not become gods or something, to sit on the throne of gods, take a step back and say, even if they arbitrarily become gods later, are naturally kind people, willing to protect the local people year after year, also do not go beyond the rules of heaven and earth, but for the self-proclaimed true dragon emperor monarch. These lewd words not decreed by the court, are in chaos in a region's feng shui, no. Different from a vassal state, weakening the dynasty's fortune, is digging a corner of the wall. Same behavior, because will shorten the national evil 5 numbers, bed chi rib how to tolerate others snoring. As for immortals, very simple, you look at people from other countries, 8 or 9 out of 10 are considered, even Jingyang Mountain, that old monkey, also considered half an immortal, all rely on themselves to walk on the great path, walk step by step up the mountain, go through the immortal peak. Cultivators are also called chi refining scholars. Cultivation work is also called cultivating immortals or cultivating truth. Chen Ping'an asked, so this Dao sect spirit official is ultimately a god or an immortal? According to Miss Ning's way of speaking, should be considered Dao sect immortals. Ning Yao's face solemn, gently shook her head, did not continue to speak out the secret of heaven. She suddenly frowned. A stone that could not be understood shot quickly, really hard hit on the spirit coffin idol that was taller than the other head just above the fist, scattering a lot of debris down below. Ning Yao waved his hand, dispelling the top of his head those mud and dirt. Chen Ping'an stood up, following Ning Yao's line of sight. He turned his head to look back. The result saw an unexpected figure. There was a dark, skinny but sturdy short teenager, squatting in the distance, a fallen idol on the ground, a hand continuously threw out a rock, catching the rock. Chen Ping'an turned around and stood shoulder to shoulder with Ning Yao, softly said, his name is Ma Ku Xian, is that alley of Xinghua that Ma grandmother grandson, very strange person, since young did not like to talk, last time at the small stream bumped into him, Ma Ku Xian also took the initiative to talk to me, he clearly already knew that snake gallstone was really valuable. The name is Ma Ku Xian. Young man stood up after continuing to estimate that stone, toward Ning Yao and Chen Ping'an smiled brightly, went straight to the point and said, if I go to Fu Lu Li Zhai Street, and with that old monkey Xingyang Shan said to find you too, I think how can catch a bag of money. However, you only need to give me 2 bags of money, I will pretend to have not seen anything. Before said, well, just business, don't think about killing people to silence. On the ground there are so many gods and bodhisattvas, but all look at us, be careful to get retribution. Too embarrassed to be angry, Ning Yao was about to speak, but was grabbed by Chen Ping'an's arm. He stepped forward and asked Ma Ku Xian in a deep voice, if I am willing to give money, can you really not say go out? Ma Ku Xian was slightly stunned. It seemed like he had never thought that this young man and young woman, so easy to talk to, would actually start a business with him. However, he was too lazy to continue acting, took out a beautiful and precious money bag, casually threw it on the ground, and said with a smile, I have already caught a reward in the Li family, but I am not for money. Na Ping Ali Chen Ping'an, Song Ji Xian next door neighbor, right? If you want to blame, then blame the guy next to you, too annoying, she ruined a lot of people's important matters yesterday. The young man pulled the corner of his mouth, stretched out his hand and pointed at himself, for example, me. Chen Ping'an looked around. Ma Ku Xian looked at Ning Yao, and said with a smile, don't worry, that old monkey temporarily has some things to deal with, I took advantage of this opportunity, wanted to ask you for something, you know what it is, right? Ning Yao sneered and said, be careful, if you have a fate, you will lose your life. Ma Ku Xian cheerfully said, you are not my wife, worry about this for what? Chen Ping'an really can't imagine, such a person full of thick ghost aura guy, how will someone feel this person is a fool? Ning Yao's face is gloomy, touches Chen Ping'an's shoulder, softly reminds, don't know why the flying sword came around here, can't get in. Ma Ku Xian slightly moved his gaze, to Chen Ping'an smirked and said, yesterday's rooftop a battle, really excellent, I just happened to see it. Oh right, you can take down the sandbag tied to your leg, otherwise you can't catch up with me. Chen Ping'an really squatted down, slowly rolled up his trouser leg, his gaze was always placed on Ma Ku Xian's body. Until now, Ning Yao was surprised to discover, originally Chen Ping'an inside trouser leg, upper leg also tied a not too tight not bad sandbag. Chen Ping'an and Ning Yao explained a sentence, when I was very young, Yang Jia Pu Zi Yang grandfather had once told me, don't take it off even if you die. Originally was calculated to use to deal with Lao Yuan's fourth tone, now thinking about it, it's not much different, because I always feel this guy called Ma Ku Xian, is just as dangerous as Lao Yuan. Ma Ku-xian gently jumped down from the idol, glanced at a dark green robed heroic young lady, muttered, originally thought that for good or bad, wait for me to leave the small town, then I can meet the #1 great Tao enemy, didn't expect to meet so quickly. Huh, really luck can't even block it. Ning Yao suddenly asked, Chen Ping'an, that guy when he was young also threw the ox's tail? Tran Binan stood up, gently stomped his feet, left and right 2 feet several times, seriously thought about Miss Nin's problem, replied, Ma grandma is very rich, so I remember this Ma Ku-xian family's yellow bull, speculator, body exceptionally big, that bull's tail thrown up, really scary. At Tran Binan stood up time, Ma Ku-xian then squatted down again, grabbed a rock and placed it on the left-hand heart. Finally, Nabin Ali teenager and Han Hoa Ali teenager, 2 friends of the same age, far away fighting. Chapter 55 Spring Wind Complacent. Chen Ping'an's left and right toes were not easy to detect but were still on the ground, seemingly still adapting to the lightness of his legs. He noticed that Ma Ku-xian had picked up a total of 5 stones, 4 held in his left hand, 1 in his right hand. Ma Ku-xian expression natural, looked toward the scabbard completely empty country girl, smile said, speak well, now is me and Chen Ping'an alone fight, according to my grandmother when young told the story, in the novel, 2 generals with before battle each pair of killing, who call for help who is not a hero, if his can battle behead the enemy, the army's heart greatly shakes, 1 round of stick is considered win. Ning Yao looked at that Ma Ku-xian immediately annoyed, she just never seen such a young man, Naping Ali Song Gxian heart is also deep, also like to show off words, all day long the young master acting, but people good or bad look is just a set of reading seed appearance, before this short thin but sturdy young man, skin cannot compare Chen Ping'an white, moreover the eyes are exceptionally big. The whole person gives people the feeling is very strange, especially moreover this kind of scar hard to read literature, like the old lady sketch half a pound of rouge in that old tree bark on, pretending to be shy, is really extremely tragic. Chen Ping'an did not have with Xinghua Ali peers to speak viciously, slightly bent back, suddenly exerted force, straight rushed forward, the momentum if the handsome horse. Really fast. Looking at Chen Ping'an rushing away silhouette, almost a blink of an eye then pulled out 2 zhang more distance with himself, although his knowledgeable Ning Yao also cannot help but feel emotional, this is not to say Chen Ping'an placed in the whole world peers among, he can run like flying faster than fox rabbit, this matter itself how unpredictable, naturally not like that, but in this world this prison building, Chen Ping'an can only rely on more than 10 years like a day extremely hard work, just bring oneself body hard to endure to this point, this is to let Ning Yao admire the place. Ning Yao thought, could it be that being able to endure hardship, is also a kind of talent? The distance between the 2 teenagers in the blink of an eye was only half. Chen Ping'an even could clearly see, Ma Ku-xian's complexion continuously changed very slightly, a moment of surprise after, turned to fear, quickly recovered composure, then without hesitation fiercely raised his arm, the entire delicate arm, blossomed out a terrifying explosive force. Has been staring straight at Ma Ku-xian's right hand movement. Chen Ping'an, no longer straight rushed forward, the moment between immediately bent to the right. Ma Ku-xian's that arm unexpectedly appeared a subtle pause, the method trembled, the target was indeed deviated from the straight trajectory. Chen Ping'an shooting quickly and kicking momentum to come raging, although not as terrifying as Xingyang Mountain Pan Shan Yuan, but is still not to be underestimated. Originally should be flustered, Chen Ping'an still has not stopped, waist a strangled, upper body tilted, that stone just from before the eyes suddenly flashed and disappeared, straw shoe youth on forehead hair was pulled by that ancient clear wind to follow the vibration. Ma Ku-xian grasped the remaining stone, left hand gently waved, among which a stone just fell into the right hand palm. This Xinghua Ali short youth, also does not seem to feel the second time to strike is enough to solve Chen Ping'an, so did not stop in place, started running towards the right hand, at the same time, brushed his hand and threw out the second stone. Straw shoe youth without any signs suddenly bent down, the pair of hands almost can touch the ground. That stone from behind on the back quickly passed, smashed Chen Ping in thin clothes. Fortunately it was only a scratch. Looking at the skin peeling, flesh peeling off, really scary. In fact the wound was not deep. At this time the two people around time was again pulled nearly half. Although Ma Ku Xian also realized should want to pull out the distance is right, but his Chen Ping and buried head rush forward, really too fast like lightning, assist to Ma Ku Xian and hastily move away the formation, as if his old bull pulling broken carriage. Therefore when Chen Ping and that dark face more closer, that straw shoe youth resolute bright eyes, especially dazzling. With this contrast, Ma Ku Xian clearly appeared a trace of hesitation. Look, is give up throw stone action, decisively quickly retreat? Still is to eat all or nothing, in the third stone on the division of victory or defeat. Ma Ku Xian hesitated, opposed Chen Ping and straightforward not retreat, formed the immortal opposition. At this moment this straw shoe youth, where is half a bit of Ali Na Ping's sloppy good person appearance? Ma Ku Xian at this kind of life and death matter crucial moment, retreated back a step, once again waved his arm. Obviously, Ma Ku Xian believed in the stone in his hand. This don't say fight, never quarreled with people before, weird teenager, from small to big doesn't like to stay together with friends of the same age, compared to Chen Ping'an or Gu Shan, more like a poisonous stray cat brat. He likes also nothing to do than grab the rock, just go to one side throw, of course the force are very light, looks like not care to play, no one is paying attention, just Ma Ku Xian in Lang Qiao below the shore, all around quiet time, will throw rocks on the river alone, slightly thin some rocks, often can on the water surface hit out more than 10 ripples after, hit the other side of the Shigong Qiao inner wall on, big explosion smash. Great physical strength, hand of the mirror is skillful. Can imagine. Ma Ku Xian often will also squat on the green ox back, use rocks to mix in the water fish. Regardless of whether or not hit the wandering fish, after all the teenager threw into the water the stone, almost no bubbles. So in the Han Hoa alley, that pile of ancestral houses, in the courtyard, or on the roof, often will lie a few magpie corpses, blood and flesh are blurred. The two people are only more than 10 steps apart, the front 2 times dodged the bitter horse stone, Chen Ping'an's body steps, more inclined to be agile and light, also does not have any place to reveal the strong tendons. The straw shoes teenager is like a piece of light fluttering leaves, but Chen Ping'an and Ma Ku Xian are about to stab each other. Chen Ping'an finally revealed the heavy side, 3 consecutive steps, already fast and fierce, filled with elasticity, falling to the ground. Like an iron hammer mixed with swords, lifting the foot is like pulling up a mountain peak. 3 steps, close at hand. Ma Ku Xian still can't come in time to throw out the stone. Logically speaking, the general situation has lost. But Chen Ping'an has no reason in his heart to be shaken, but still doesn't have any retreat, because the situation is urgent, has not accepted him to stop before the edge, might as well let go and jump, risk a bucket. Ma Ku Xian's mouth corners twitched, a smile pondered, left hand let go, threw away the remaining stone, raised right hand which was originally a fist, so it was a convenient punch to go out. He from the beginning dug a trap for Chen Ping'an, the so-called suspicion, intentionally gave Chen Ping'an a chance to get close, even why must choose to take the stone to do the attack method, all are this Xinghua alley idiot kid secret scheme. Because it is the enemy to take the weak, bring can from Lao Yuan subordinates escape loach teenager, hook to lead to oneself side, make this Chen Ping'an oneself deliver to the door come. One hand of the stick, that is one punch of the stick. Chen Ping'an is one not too obviously left-handed, therefore with Ma Ku Xian right hand hold hands, heart to heart hit together. In the fist touch each other instant, almost at the same time, 2 teenagers then respectively toward the opponent one leg kick. Chen Ping'an and Ma Ku Xian simultaneously fly backwards out, fiercely throw down on the mud. The 2 people separated more than 20 steps, Ma Ku Xian crawled up, kneeling on one knee on the ground, mouth panting. He raised his arm, let go of his fist, because the palm of that hand the rock had not been thrown out, so at this time the youth's palm, although could not be called a bloody mess, but was already a bright red piece, looking horrifying. Ma Ku-xian curled his lips, rubbed his belly, eyes extremely hot, loudly laughed at Chen Pinyin and said, "Chen Pinyin, do you dare to come again?" Chen Pinyin's left hand is more miserable, because in front of the alleyway, he gathered at the Yunhe Mountain Taijinjian, the palm of his hand was cut deeply by the broken porcelain, this period of time, although he has always been covered with the secret herbal medicine passed down from Yang Jia Pozi, but it is 100,000 injuries to the tendons and bones. The youth's body is tough, after all, he is not this kind of life and death person, flesh and bone cultivation immortal, so with Ma Kuxuan exchanging this one punch one leg, Chen Pinyin is even more harmful. Chen Pinyin has bandaged cotton-wrapped left hand, has been involuntarily shaking slightly, fresh blood flows out of the cotton, drop by drop stops on the weeds on the side of the foot. Chen Pinyin deliberately goes to take a deep breath, so clearly feels the pain transmitted from the abdomen. He wants to determine this kind of pain, to his next action, will ultimately create how big an impact. This is a habit that allows. Chen Pinyin is poor origin, the main reason is because of having too little things, so he is exceptionally meticulous. On the contrary, Song Xin Lu Jingchen, such rich and noble descendants, absolutely will not care about how many coins in the pocket. This is a big matter without regard for prudence. Chen Pinyin of course is not. Therefore Chen Pinyin gives people the impression, always with the same formality, warm village and forbearance. These words involved, young people according to common sense should be spirited and impetuous, on the contrary not much, to the point that in front of them that incomprehensible ran out, wanted to fight Ma Kuxuan to death with Chen Pinyin. Ningyao probably belongs to the incomprehensible freak. Ningyao can at least use the sharp point to describe, Ma Kuxuan this kind is completely incomprehensible. Chen Pinyin did not turn his head, turned his back to Ningyao and gently waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. Ma Ku-xian slowly stood up in front of the teenager, scratched a weed, casually wiped away the blood stains on the palm. Chen Pinyin followed to stand up. Ma Ku-xian took the lead to exert force. At the beginning the station position was stepped out 2 mud puddles. This skinny monkey-like skinny but sturdy teenager quickly came to unimaginable, high jumped up, a knee stabbed towards the front that came Chen Pinyin. Chen Pinyin a punch to Ma Ku-xian that remember knee stabbed down, but was by the air body before tilting Ma Ku-xian lightning punch, a punch exploded smashed on the forehead. Ma Ku-xian originally twisted curled up 2 legs, instantly stretched out, in the body leaning back. Chen Pinyin chest really hardest stomped. Chen Pinyin seemed to be hit by a big hammer on the head, moreover was simultaneously hit by the chest, almost straight and leaned back fell to the ground. Ma Ku-xian body in the air whirled around a circle, fell to the ground after continued to laugh ferociously, rushed forward, very quickly then ran like flying to the half squatted up Chen Pinyin in front of the person. Ma Ku-xian was one leg. Chen Pinyin 2 hands intertwined to support in the front, the left arm outside the right arm inside, tightly protecting the chest and face. Chen Pinyin was kicked by this one leg to fly backwards out, but the center of gravity was extremely low, and protected the vital points, also did not appear bloody image. A rolling road. Ma Ku-xian took advantage of the situation not to let go of the person, continued to rush forward. When Chen Pinyin stopped after rolling the position for a moment, unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, the whole person turned into kneeling on one knee on the ground, bending over to run to gain momentum posture. Ma Ku-xian expression stiffened. Immediately afterwards, Chen Pinyin like a branch from the strong bough pulled full shot quickly out the arrow, blinked to Ma Ku-xian in front of the person, speed extremely fast, with the front compared with, different like 2 people. The enemy takes the weak. Chen Pinyin will also. Ma Ku-xian this time basically did not have time to punch, was already hit by Chen Pinyin using his shoulder to the chest. Ma Ku-xian staggered back, abdomen again transmitted a wave of pain, instinctively bowed his head and bent his back. The left ear temple on the other side had been swept horizontally by Chen Pinyin using his arm to sweep across, and in the middle, the powerful momentum sank. In front occupied all the upper hand. Ali Han Ho, a teenager, took a kind of cunning posture too. Legs flying up in the air, flank flew away. Chen Ping'an suddenly grabbed Ma Ku-Xian 2 legs ankle, brought Ma Ku-Xian spin a circle, roared, General Talent 90 many pounds low-weight teenager fiercely threw down towards the distance. Just happened to stab towards a half-broken sitting idol, 1.5 meters tall. If there was no accident, Ma Ku-Xian this time was destined to be very miserable. It is Ma Ku-Xian's ling is not relying on external objects, self-formed an accident. He 2 feet front and back stepped on the idol head, then blinked and blinked straight. The whole person relied on huge force to shoot back, and Chen Ping'an's previous ambush had the same effect as the wonderful, toward the distant place on the ground opponent shot quickly. But Ma Ku-Xian suddenly shocked and stared. Only saw Chen Ping'an standing in place, high raised a hand, don't know when, in his hand he held a hollow appeared short knife, the tip of the knife then straight pointed toward flying quickly rushed to Ma Ku-Xian. The world so-called seeking death, roughly speaking is this kind of situation. Even if Chen Ping'an's hand holding the knife was violently shaking, but it was enough to pierce through Ma Ku-Xian's body with a knife, the difference was only in the iron entrance was the arm, the head was still the chest. Ma Ku-Xian was not afraid of falling into a deep despair, although he was extremely frightened, he did not give up his mind at all, with difficulty he turned his body, even if he was only a little bit, he wanted to make his own vital points deviate from the trajectory of that blade. But at this moment, a slender figure appeared between the two youths. It was a middle-aged man, with a long sword on his back, and a mysterious tiger talisman on his waist. Not seeing how he would attack, Ma Ku-Xian immediately reversed the universe as if, not only did his 2 feet fall to the ground, but his body stood straight at the man's side. Then the sword-wearing man turned his head to look at the young man who had retreated 1 step behind him, his eyes carried undisguised praise and admiration, and he softly laughed, "You two this time fought to a good degree." Chen Ping'an's mouth corners were stained with blood, and he took another step back. The man laughed and let it go, suggesting, "I took action to save Ma Ku-Xian, I owe you a favor, so after I go out, I will persuade Xingyang Mountain Pan Shan Yuan to give up on you 2 chases, how about that?" Ningya walked to Chen Ping'an's side. This one came from Jinwu Mountain's military family cultivator, deeply looked at the young girl, then said to Chen Ping'an, "You don't have the qualifications to bargain, if you agree then nod, if you don't agree then continue to be silent that is. If you feel unfair, unwilling, and if you can still be lucky enough to escape from old Yuan's subordinates, then after leaving the small town, you can go to Jinwu Mountain to find me, I hope you think it's fair." Chen Ping'an took back the knife Ning Yao lent him for himself, hid it in his right sleeve, nodded to that Jinwu Mountain man and said, "If there is a chance, I will." Ma Ku-Xian was about to speak when the man indifferently said, "The dead have no right to speak cruel words to the living." Ma Ku-Xian tightly pursed his lips, really bowed his head and did not speak. A big one small, this towards Shen Wushan master and disciple, gradually went far away. Chen Ping'an sat on the ground with a butt. Ning Yao quickly squatted down, anxiously said, "How is it? Where is the most seriously injured? That Daoist Lu deputy prescription is dead, are you also using it?" The face was bruised and bruised, the young man with a sour face said, "Doesn't matter, still know where it hurts, it means the injury is not serious." "That's right, if Lao Yuan ran over at this time." "Come then come." The young girl also resolutely sat on the ground, her face was arrogant, "Just now you were there, wait until next I am here, what is there to be afraid of?" Chen Ping'an had not said the last half-sentence of words, only had to secretly swallow them back. Ning Yao suddenly smiled brightly, stretched out his hands, and gave the straw shoe youth a thumbs up, "Handsome." Here in front, this life never felt that he was formidable in the narrow alley youth, forcefully suppressed the smile at the corner of his mouth, intentionally making himself more indifferent and light-hearted. But in fact, everyone could see that he was comfortable. The spring breeze youth was very proud.